Hello, it's Dr. Jeffrey Mark. Today I'd like to talk to you about boosters. I've had a lot of questions from many people asking me about the vaccine boosters, and most recently the FDA and CDC have come up with some guidelines on October 20th regarding the use of COVID-19 vaccine boosters. So as a quick review, we know that the first vaccine that came out was for Pfizer, and that's Pfizer-BioNTech. And what happens with this vaccine is you get a first shot, and then 3 weeks later you get a second shot. And then for next vaccine that became available was Moderna, and you got a first shot for that, and then 4 weeks later you have a second shot. The final vaccine that came out that's authorized was the J&J, and for that one, first and only shot. And now the CDC has authorized booster injections. So for the Pfizer, after the second injection, if it's been 6 months, and you have the following criteria: if you're over 65, or if you're in a high-risk group, such as immunocompromised or any other risk, such as or frequent exposure, like healthcare workers. And you can get injections if you're 18 to 64 years of age. You can get a booster, and I'll tell you what your choices are there. If you're Moderna, kind of similar thing. 6 months after your second injection, if you're greater than age 65, or if you're in the high risk or frequently exposed group, then if you're 18 to 64, you can also qualify for a booster. And the J&J is a little bit different. If you have had the first injection and only injection, 2 months later you can get another injection, which is the booster, if you're over age 18. And I'll show you in a few minutes why that's likely the case, why they're encouraging everyone with the J&J to get a booster injection. So what are your choices in terms of boosters? Well, the CDC is authorized for, if you had a Pfizer, you can get a second Pfizer. You can get a half dose Moderna, which is authorized now as a booster, or you can get the J&J. So this applies to Moderna as well. For their booster, you can have the same choices: Pfizer, another dose of the Moderna, but at half a dose, because that's what was authorized or requested, or you can get the J&J. And for the J&J, same choices: Pfizer, half dose Moderna, or another J&J. So now that you know what the CDC recommendations are on boosters, you might want to ask, well, are there studies on which booster is better for what combination? And there is a preliminary study that you can see on your screen here is called the heterologous SARS CoV-2 Booster Vaccinations, a preliminary report. And this report actually was generated from a number of hospitals and other facilities, university settings, and Kaiser data, and they pooled them all together. And what this study looked at, let me show you. So this is, and basically they looked at 458 people, and approximately 154 got Moderna, 150 had J&J, and about 154 had Pfizer. They were fully vaccinated. They looked at giving them a booster after 12 weeks. And then they roughly split people up in approximately groups of 50 in each area. And those that received the Moderna, so approximately 50 got another Moderna, and approximately 50 got J&J as their secondary booster, and another 50 got Pfizer. And then for the J&J, they did the same thing. So about 50 got Moderna, another 50 got J&J, and another got Pfizer after the 12 weeks. And for Pfizer, the same thing. So they split them up, 50 Moderna, 50 J&J, and 50 Pfizer. So we'll look at the data at what was found. So this is the overall data. Now it looks like a lot to look at, and we'll go through some of these briefly, but there's a summary slide that actually will pull it all together. So as I mentioned, these are the groups. It's basically looking at 9 different groups of people. The initial people that had the J&J, you can see there, there's 51, and they had 57.1, which is antibodies, and this one just looked at antibody assay. So this is on day 1. Obviously, this is before any effects of the booster, so this is what their baseline is at. And for Moderna and Pfizer, BioNTech, you can see that most of these groups, their baseline antibody rates were much higher, which does seem to correlate with the fact that Moderna and Pfizer have lower rates of symptomatic infections, also protective, obviously, against hospitalizations. But perhaps the lower antibody titers that you can see, 57.1, 71.3, and 75.1, with the starting groups of the Janssen or J&J, may explain why there may be more symptoms, less protection regarding actual infection, symptomatic infection, but still there was the protection from hospitalizations. But you can see the much higher rates again for Moderna, Pfizer, BioNTech throughout on this first line. So on day 15, after getting the booster, you can see we'll focus on the Janssen J&J first. You can see if you got J&J and you had the Moderna as a booster, on day 15 your antibodies went up to this number. These are units per milliliter. This boost should be noted that it was 100 micrograms, and the current booster that's authorized, as I mentioned before, is a half dose of Moderna, which is 50 micrograms. So the data is not exactly applicable, but you can see that there's quite a bit of a response with if you had J&J and was boosted with Moderna. On day 29, it's still a very robust response. And you can see here with if you had Moderna as a baseline, first 2 injections, fully vaccinated, then got a Moderna as a booster. So you're started here. So if you had the Moderna, and then you had, so you can see you're starting off at a higher baseline, 859 units per milliliters of binding antibodies. You had a very rigorous response by day 15. And again, this is with a full dose of 100 micrograms as the booster, when currently it's just approved for the 50 microgram dose. So it's unknown as to how much the half dose will increase, but obviously there should be an increase as well, but that hasn't been studied. And then by day 29, of course, things do settle down a little bit, but you still have a very robust response. Likely, if you had, in a similar manner, if you had Pfizer BioNTech as your full vaccination dose, 12 weeks later, you received, again, 30 micrograms, which is the full dose of Pfizer BioNTech, and you started off at a fairly good level, not as high as the Moderna's, you would have a very vigorous response, just pretty much similar to the Moderna, and it's sustained at day 29 as well. And you could see here, if you go through the same things, like if you had J&J initially, and then you had the J&J as a booster, you can see here that you started lower. You have a little bit of a response, roughly about 4 times on day 15, so times 4. And this was more of a response that's much higher. 7 makes, and you can see that the robustness actually starts to increase a little bit on day 29. But still not as high as if you had gotten the Moderna as a booster. You can see, you can compare the 15s easier, 3,203 versus 326. So, and then if you had Moderna and you got the J&J, you do have a response, which is 3,000, but it is not as high as if you had a second dose of Moderna. It continues to increase, however, by day 29. And then in terms of, but still not as high as if you had Moderna as a booster for the Moderna. For Pfizer, similar kinds of things that you could see. You get a boost at day 15, and it actually goes a little bit higher on day 29. So there may be a slight delayed effect of benefit JJ as it goes on. However, the amount is still not as high and vigorous as third Pfizer dose would be. And this is if you got Pfizer. If you got J&J and Pfizer, you get a pretty good response as well. Not quite as high as if you had the Moderna as the booster. The data is incomplete. These are in process because the data has not been completed yet. This is just a preliminary study. And again, if you had Moderna and then you got the Pfizer, again, pretty good response. Not as quite as good as Moderna as a booster, but statistically is in the same ballpark. Again, unknown about day 29. And then same thing if you had the Pfizer and then you got a second Pfizer, it looks like a pretty good response as well. These are the neutralizing antibodies, and it's actually, the numbers look lower, but this is a different scale, looking at different types of antibodies that are, this might be actually more meaningful. And you can see here the neutralizing antibodies for this is the J&J. To start with was 89 or 8.9 versus the Moderna at 88.7 and the Pfizer at 24.8. That's all at the baseline on day 1, so that's without the booster. So you can see that neutralizing antibodies are higher from Moderna and Pfizer after their 2-shot vaccine. Now, if you got the Moderna, this is what the first group here is. The J&J, it goes way up, as you can see, about 76 times, and is sustained at 29 days as well. And for Moderna, you get a vigorous response as well that is sustained. Same with Pfizer, and is sustained. And all the rest of these numbers you can see here, very similar. We don't have day 29 data for a lot of these neutralizing antibodies, so I'm not going to go through every single one, but you can understand the rationale that I'm showing you. So another way to look at this, which may be more helpful, is graphically. If you look at the graph here, and I could increase the size, you can see here this group is J&J, this group is Moderna, and this group is the Pfizer. So you can see here with the J&J in this first box, with the Moderna boost, that you start lower, but you're actually quite high by day 15 and sustained at 29. So graphically you can see that this is quite a vigorous response. If you had the Moderna, you started off higher and you got this boost, and that was sustained as well. It might be slightly higher in terms of antibodies than the J&J, but the protection you can see is quite boosted in the J&J, much more similar than before the boost. And then if you had Pfizer BioNTech, you start off about the same level as the Moderna and you got a similar boost. So it looks like if you had the J&J, which is the rationale for the CDC suggesting everybody over age 18 get a booster, you can see that it brings you pretty much with parity with the other messenger RNA, presumably increasing protection. Now this doesn't measure T cells and other components of the immune system, but assuming that most of the protection is from antibody initially, this would bring you closer. So in theory, at least, less chance of having symptoms even with the J&J initially if you had the boost. This one's looking at J&J as a booster, and you can see that you do get a boost with the Moderna and the Pfizer, not quite as high as you do with the Moderna boost, but the J&J doesn't quite bring you to parity with the others if you had second J&J, and it's not clear why that would be. It's possible that since it's an adenovirus vector, that your body is already used to the initial adenovirus and it takes it apart faster than you would get the full effect of production of the spike protein the second time. But again, that's just speculation. This looks at the boost with the BioNTech, and you can see again with all three you get a pretty good boost. That we don't have the day 29 data, but you do get a boost, and you get closer to parity with the Pfizer BioNTech. The other ones are for the neutralizing antibodies, and you could take a look at that as well, but since it's an incomplete data set without the day 29, we won't go into as much detail in those. So bottom line conclusion is it looks like you can get any of these as a booster, Pfizer, half dose, Moderna, and J&J, but if you had the Pfizer, then you'd probably be better off with either repeating with the Pfizer or the half dose Moderna. If you had the Moderna, the highest number generated would be the Moderna, and pretty much similar with the Pfizer. The J&J boost did not boost as much. However, the day 29 data was still increasing, so it's possible you could have it might get better as time went on. But the interesting thing about the J&J is that if you get a booster with the Moderna, this brings you almost pretty much at parity with the others, but not so much with the second J&J. Intermediate with the Pfizer. So according to the preliminary data, then if you had J&J, you would probably want to go with the half-dose Moderna as your booster as of the data right now. So despite the boosters and antibodies, ultimately the best defense is still your immune system. So having a strong immune system through lifestyle, nutrition, supplements, and keeping overall health is key to optimizing your immune system. So for AFH programs on optimizing your immune health and other AFH cognitive or brain health programs, you can contact us at info@jeffreymarkmd.com. You can find us on the web at www.allfunctionalhealth.com and schedule a consult or appointment. Or you may call us at area code 925-736-9828. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Mark, and we've helped thousands of people on their journey of health, and we look forward to helping you as well. Take care and stay healthy.